What's going on, everybody? I'm Primalliquid and welcome to my review for Metal Gear Solid Delta. Now, we are going to be going over 4 things in this video, namely the gameplay, the graphics, the sound, and the performance of the actual game. We're not really going to touch on the story because, honestly, there's really not much point in that. Simply due to the fact, well, it's just the same as MGS3 that released like over 20 years ago. There's not really anything to actually say about that has changed. So we're just going to talk about the actual gameplay, graphics, sound, and performance. So let's start with the gameplay. Now, straight off the bat, the gameplay is kind of similar to the original, which, yes, it is kind of obvious. It's a remake slash a remaster. There's really not a whole lot of difference there between the two. However, in terms of new things, there is actually a new mode, which I'm actually playing right now. This is called New Style. So when you start the game, you will actually have an option between choosing New Style and Legacy Style. New Style is what you are seeing right now. It's fully camera controlled, it's over the shoulder aiming, you've got regular first person aiming if you want to, so it's a little bit similar to the original, but it also incorporates more of the MGS5 style of gameplay and gunplay. However, unfortunately, with that, there are also some changes, and that is namely the controls. So right now, L2 and R2 is your typical aim and fire, as you can see right here. However, a few of the other controls are pretty weird. For example, the X button, it doesn't roll, it doesn't crouch, it doesn't do anything other than interact with things. So if I wanted to, say, fall off the bridge, for example, then we would use the X button to actually climb back up. That is just basically to interact with the environment these days. If you want to actually crouch or go prone, that is the circle button, which, yeah, is a little bit out there, it's a little bit different. However, I think the biggest, probably weird change when it comes to the controls is the roll button. So the roll button is actually triangle, and unfortunately, it's actually not that responsive. Like, you press triangle to roll, and then you kind of wait sort of 6 years to actually get the roll animation going. Not only that, the entire animation as a whole is actually a little bit sluggish and a little bit slow, which is kind of a shame, but I do feel like that can definitely be tweaked with some kind of update. It is most definitely nowhere near as level of responsive as the original MGS3 actually was. In terms of like menu arrangement, so this is now done with the D-pad, okay? Which I'm also not a huge fan of personally, but it's fine. For MGS3, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. If it was a different game, then I feel like it would be a little bit more awkward. But for MGS3, it's not a huge deal. Up is basically your impromptu button, okay? So if I was to injure myself, by pressing up on the D-pad, it would bring up the cure menu automatically for me. And down is the codec. However, in order to actually use the codec, you have to hold the down button. Now, you can sort of bring up this little menu and then press triangle to open the full radio menu, which is unfortunately the only way to do it. There is no other way to get into the radio. If you were to press the main button on the PS5 controller, then it just brings up your actual menu. If you were to press start, it just brings up the pause menu. I should also state that I am actually doing this on a normal PS5, okay? This is not being played on Steam, on a PC, or on PS5 Pro. This is the base PS5 version. Now, also, with regard to the actual gameplay, there are a couple of new items that have been added into the game as well. So, in terms of the actual equipment, there's nothing new here, unfortunately. There are no new weapons or anything like that added into the game, which, considering its status as a remake instead of a remaster, I do definitely feel like that has definitely missed the ballpark there, personally. I do think a few new items should have been added, just for, a little touch of variety. In terms of the actual item menu, there are actually some new items. So when you actually start the game the very first time, you will actually have a compass now, which is basically just a tool that shows you where you actually need to go. So you can see that down in the bottom left there. It's your bog standard compass. It tells you which way is north, and then when there's actually a story objective on the map, it will show up on the compass as a little yellow dot. Now, personally, I have no idea why that's a thing. Okay, I have literally no idea why that's a thing, simply due to the fact that when you actually go into the map, all the maps are really tiny. You know, they're all really small, they're all really straightforward. It's kind of, MGS3 is kind of the game that is almost impossible to get lost in. There's no mazes, there's no big areas or anything like that, so the compass just seems kind of unnecessary. You know, it's definitely a bit of an unnecessary addition in my personal opinion. As for other new items, we do actually have a couple. So first of all, we have the Crocodile Cap One-Eyed. So this is just kind of, I tell you what, let's just throw all these on actually. Okay, so the Crocodile Cap One-Eyed is just your regular crocodile cap, okay? So this is very similar to what you could actually find in the Swampland. The only difference is it's a one-eyed version. Now, this, I believe, comes from having the deluxe version. Same with the Keratin mask and the Gecko mask. However, you can actually change the way that Snake wears these on his face. So you can either have it on his face or just balanced on his head. Likewise, because Snake vs. Monkey is indeed back, you have the banana hat, and you also have a gold version. Now, the gold version is a reward just for completing all the stages and finding all of the Astrobots in those stages. There are, I think, 8 stages, and there's an Astrobot hidden in each stage. Simply find them all, and you should be rewarded with this. It has no special effect or anything like that. It's just there. As for the AT Camouflage, so this one is a little bit unique. Obviously, completing the game, it gives you access to stealth camo when you collect all 64 keratins. That is the same as in the original. However, in Delta, geckos have been added as well. Now, if you've played Metal Gear Online or Metal Gear Online 2, you'll be very familiar with what a gecko is. If you've not, well, here is a regular keratin, which has not spawned. Okay, that must spawn after the cutscene with Eva. Oh, wait, no, never mind. I was looking in the wrong place. I was looking in the Virtuous Mission place. Okay, so there is a keratin right there. That is what everybody who has played the original MGS3 is familiar with. However, there is another animal as well, and you can see it right there. It's basically the same as a keratin, only it's a little duck. Now, this is mainly a thing from Metal Gear Online and Metal Gear Online 2, but they have also been added now. And just like the keratins, there are 64 of them throughout the game. However, they are ridiculously hard to actually see, as they themselves are wearing a camouflage. So they blend into the background, making them very, very difficult. Luckily enough, though, as I said, the areas in the game are small, so they're not too hard to find. Once you complete the game, as long as you shoot all 64 of them, you will be rewarded with the AT camo. Now, what this is it's basically a ghillie suit that can be deployed and retracted instantly. The item will multiply the camouflage effect that is currently equipped. So what this does is, it's a ghillie suit that works with any camo in any environment. It basically doubles your camo effectiveness, in a sense. So down in the middle, you can see my camo right now is at 35, right? That will not go up to 70 when I equip it. Watch. See, we only went up to 45. Now, why is that the case? Well, that's because it only doubles the camo effectiveness. So we're on 15 right now. If I use it again, we go up to 25. That is because right now my camo is only giving me a value of 10, basically. If I was to change my camo to something else, it would also get a little bit better. So let's just throw on this one. So right now we're at 25. If I equip it, we go to 35. Okay, we're still only 10, but you get the idea. It basically doubles the camo effectiveness for the area. Now, this is an incredibly, incredibly good item to use when trying to get the Foxhound rank, and is definitely worthwhile getting. In terms of being a new item, though, I mean, it's nice to have, but it's nothing game breaking. It's nothing super amazing or anything like that. But at least on the bright side, it is new. Now, let's talk about the graphics, shall we? So to do this, we're going to actually have a normal little look around the area. And then we're also going to jump into a cutscene. Now, we are going to keep the cutscene early on just because, you know, some people might not have played the game, so try to avoid spoilers. And of course, we're in the start of the game right now anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. So, let's take a look at the actual graphics, shall we? Now, straight off the bat, the area itself is quite nice. There is quite a bit of detail added to a lot of the environments, and I should note this is playing in performance mode instead of quality mode. So you can see there's been quite a overhaul, really. And likewise, if you actually look at Snake's model as well, if we go into photo mode so we can zoom in a little, you can actually really see a lot more detail that's been added overall compared to like the remaster, for example, that released back on the PS3 and PS4. Obviously, that is to be expected considering it is a PS5 release and it is touted as a remake. However, I don't personally class this as a remake, okay? Yes, a lot of things have been actually made from scratch, like the new models. They're still using the same skeleton models. However, the models themselves have been redone. All the areas have been redone. A lot of the original soundtrack, for example, Snake Eater, has also been re-recorded. And I do believe the actual voice lines have been re-recorded as well. In terms of environments, the game is definitely a lot more colorful than when it originally released. Obviously, MGS3 released on the PS2 back in the day. This means it did unfortunately suffer from quite a bit of bloom and also oversaturation. Back in the PS2 days, saturation was used to hide like jagged edges on things. So now let's take a look at the cutscene. And obviously, when it comes to a much more recent game, they can obviously go a lot further with the models themselves, so they don't need that overly sharp color aspect. And this level of brightness is actually going to bring me nicely to another topic. Now, I've seen a lot of drama online going over the way the game looks in terms of brightness. Firstly, I have actually turned my brightness up in the game, okay, because I personally found it a little too dark at first. So I've massively inflated the brightness that you are seeing right here. One of the big things is, I know that it's been going the rounds on Twitter. It's a picture of the ending screen where you have Snake stood over the grave of the boss. It's basically showing a comparison picture between the original PS2 version and then a version it is describing as Delta. I can confirm that image is fake. It is not Delta. It is showing the original PS2 version and then a comparison with the remaster. Now, the remaster was overly saturated with brightness and bloom. Likewise, you can really see it in that particular cutscene. However, that is the picture that is used in that Twitter post. It is not Delta. Delta actually looks a lot closer to the original than the remaster back on the PS3 and the PS4 did. Obviously, just touched up. Now, of course, all the models themselves have also been redone. That also means Eva, Big Boss, Ocelot, the Boss, Volgan. Everybody has brand new models with much more attention to detail, especially this little bit right here. Now, you can definitely notice a lot more of the detail in things, like the stitching on the bra, for example, which, you know, we're totally not going to perv on. Now, in terms of actual graphical quality, realistically, as far as I am concerned, it stands up. You know, it definitely stands up to games these days. It's not hyper realistic, but MGS was never a game about visually being hyper realistic. You know, this isn't COD or anything like that. But even that doesn't really try to be hyper realistic anymore. So I think really graphically, the game is perfectly fine with this kind of appearance. Obviously, you can lower and raise the brightness as you so want. That comes down to personal preference. And regardless of what level of brightness you're playing on, I've definitely seen no effects of overbloom, you know? Which is quite weird because I've seen a lot of people complaining about that, so I'm just putting that down to people complaining about things that they actually know nothing about. So, with that said, let's move on to sound. Now, I have slightly touched on this just, however, all the dialogue has been redone. And thankfully, we have David Hayter back. Now, I don't know about you guys, I think Kiefer Sutherland in MGS5 was okay for the 15 words he said all game. And yes, people can turn around and say, oh, they didn't use David because it's not Snake. It's, you know, Venom is just one of the gods made to look like Snake, yada, yada, yada. Guess what? Naked Snake and Solid Snake are two different characters as well. Same voice actor, so there was no real excuse for not using David in that. It's like, yes, from a planning perspective, I can slightly understand it. But again, when the guy only says 15 words all game, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Now, in terms of all the voice dialogue being re-recorded, which, by the way, absolutely sounds phenomenal. They've got all the original voice actors back that I can actually tell. Anyway, I can't hear any real differences. And you can really tell that these characters still know how to do their voices, which is great because it sounds just the way I remember it, only very touched up. You know, you can tell it's been modern day re-recorded. One of the easiest ways to tell about the re-recording, though, is the Snake Eater theme when you are climbing the ladder. Now, I'm not going to spoil that in this video because I do think that is something that people should experience for themselves because it still has that moment, that impact. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to show that. However, I do definitely think it is worth watching. Overall, though, sound not bad. I've not really had any issues. You know, there's nothing too quiet, nothing too loud. It's balanced very, very nicely. It's clean. It's crisp, whether you're listening to it through speakers, through a TV, or through headphones. It's pretty good. Now, let's talk performance. So for this, we're going to skip the cutscene here, okay? Now, performance, once again, I have actually heard some good and some bad things about this. Namely, I've heard of, I can't remember the channel name, but it's basically a YouTube channel, very popular, and they go around testing frame rates on game releases and stuff like that. Now, from what they've said, the game on performance mode basically jumps between 40 and 60 FPS, while quality mode sort of hovers around 30 to 40. Now, I don't know how accurate that is or anything like that. I really have no idea. What I will say, however, okay, is I've not actually noticed any FPS dips. The game still runs pretty smooth overall. You know, like, well, when I say pretty smooth, I mean really smooth, to be honest. I've not noticed any sort of big dips, any stuttering or anything like that, except in one situation in the main game, and then another situation in the Snake v Monkey game. These are the only times I have ever noticed an actual performance drop. These two times are related to the water. So, well, I say these two times. One of the times is related to the water. The time in the actual main game is when you are in the water and you are sort of transitioning between above water and below water. That is the only time I have personally ever noticed a huge drop in frame rate, but it's only during that initial transition period between the two. However, in the Snake v Monkey mode, that itself does definitely have performance hiccups, and I'm not entirely sure why. Because in terms of the area, it's the exact same areas that you have in game. The only difference really is you've got the monkeys running around, which still aren't really doing a lot. They don't have any super, you know, animated effects, or there's no huge amounts of particles or anything like that. So that I can really tell, there's nothing really that should be dropping the performance. But it was definitely noticeable in a couple of those stages, for sure. In terms of just general gameplay though, I've personally experienced no issues with the story, as I say, other than the water. Again, I am playing on a normal PS5 non-pro version, and I am on performance mode. So, what about quality mode? Well, let's skip the cutscene and we'll actually change over to it and we can take a look, can't we? Okay, so for this, we're going to go into options, down to graphics, graphic mode. We're going to change over to quality. So this one basically locks it at 1440 native and 30 FPS. Now, apparently the native style is not completely accurate, but we'll see. So let's just load on over to the quality performance and we'll take a look. So straight off the bat, you can definitely notice the lower frame rate, okay? You can 100% notice the lower frame rate. It's definitely chugging a little bit. It's definitely jittery. You can definitely see a performance impact in quality mode. If you actually look at the details of the areas though, the lighting, the shadow, realistically, I don't really see much difference. Let's go back to performance right now. Oops, wrong one. Graphics, performance. There we go. Yeah, I can't really see much difference. Maybe it's a little less color saturated, but again, I definitely can't notice a huge quality difference. In terms of performance though, you can definitely see it's a lot smoother in performance mode. So let's talk about one more thing, and that is the two new styles. So if you go into game, you can change your play style, okay? You have the new style with player controls that are in line with modern action games. That is not true. I don't know a single action game where roll is triangle. I do think the controls are definitely very, very bad on the new style, but that's my personal preference. As for legacy style, if we actually change over to that, okay? So this, oh, no, that did not change. Okay, there we go. Yeah, okay, we'll restart from the previous checkpoint. That's fine. Okay, so legacy style basically plays like it used to in MGS3 originally. Now, this is the original MGS3, okay? This is not the MGS3 substance. This is the original Snakey, so where you have the overhead camera, your analog stick moves around sort of just the area itself. And then you're aiming, you know, you can aim while running like that. Obviously, you can shoot while running like that. If you went into first person, it just instantly locks you. What is new, however, is the left and right analog stick can now no longer be used for aiming. Likewise, right now we're using R1 to aim and R2 to shoot. I'm not a fan of that. And then with you not being able to move the camera with the left analog stick, you're essentially doing everything with your right hand. So your thumb is on the analog stick, moving the aiming around. R1 is, you have to hold R1 to actually aim the gun, and then R2 to shoot. Not a fan of that, personally. If you want to sneak like this, you have to press L1. That is also the same for the new style as well. However, this does actually put the dodge button, the roll button, back as X. The melee combo is back to being a circle, which I do think is quite nice. So that is something I am a fan of. You still have to use the D-pad though for the menus, the camouflage, the codec and stuff like that. So nothing really changes on that front. However, it's definitely a little more sluggish and dated. Obviously, it is based on the legacy style, so it is going to be. You know, it is definitely going to be for sure. One thing I did not touch on, however, which is actually different depending on whether you're playing Legacy or not. So let me quickly throw on the MK22. Now, if we equip the MK2, okay, let's just aim. So, as you can see right here, if we take a shot, the bullet goes straight. Yeah, the bullet goes completely straight with a tiny bit of drop way off in the distance there. Let's actually now go back to the new style, because I think this is going to be something that will probably irritate a lot of people, because they have indeed added MGS5 style bullet drop. It is only seemingly on the MK22 for some reason. However, it is an exceptionally steep drop. So if we just aim like that and shoot, so as you can see, the bullet doesn't even reach the end platform over there. It just ends up in the water. So we really can't make that much of a distance with this shot. Now, obviously, if you're playing on very easy, it doesn't matter because you have the easy gun, which doesn't actually have that bullet drop. The bullet just goes exactly where you shoot it. However, if you're going for something like Foxhound rank, this is going to be a huge impact. In the original Foxhound run and boss run and big boss run and stuff like that, there are definitely some long-range shots that you need to make with this, and having such a steep level of bullet drop is not that fun, in my opinion. This is one of the things I hated in MGS5. Did I get used to it? Yes. Did I enjoy it? No. I absolutely detested it. But it is unfortunately back, and it is determined by the mode you are on. If you're playing New Style, you have bullet drop. If you are not playing a New Style, if you're playing Legacy, you do still have a bullet drop, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was. Now, in terms of my review score, what am I going to give this? Honestly, I'm a huge Metal Gear Solid fan. I love the games. I always have. I pretty much love anything Metal Gear Solid in general. In terms of the score, I think I'm going to be pretty generous, and I'm going to give it, say, an 8. You know, just for gameplay, graphics, sound, performance. Yes, the performance struggles in the actual quality mode, but in performance mode, it's perfectly fine, in my opinion. I think an 8 out of 10 is fair. It's nothing super amazing, it's nothing super special or anything like that, but it is a total redo of a cult classic, in my opinion. Well, I say a cult classic, a classic game. You know, this really does help take you back to the good old days of gaming back during the PS2 era. Now, I do think they could have made improvements in some aspects. For example, they could have added new equipment. They definitely had the capability and the time to do that. However, they chose not to, which is definitely a bit of a shame, in my opinion. Oops. So it's kind of one of them. You know what I mean? Could they have done more? Yes. Should they have? In my opinion, yes. But functionally, it's still a good game. I have just also seen that Konami have apparently reported that there are a couple of crashes in the game. However, I can honestly say in 3 full playthroughs now, I've not experienced any of those crashes personally. So I'm not sure how bad they actually are or how widespread they are. However, just looking at the common causes of them, most people are probably not going to experience them anyway. I imagine a lot of those were probably found by the in-house Q&A team, personally. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was players that found them, but I have no idea. In terms of problems with the game, though, honestly, there aren't really many, other than, obviously, it's an MGS game. The cutscenes are long. The gameplay is short. So it is kind of a lot to ask for the price that they're selling it for. For example, the deluxe edition is like 80 to 90 pound. I don't know what the US price is or anything like that. Is it worth that? In my opinion, no. I don't think it's necessarily worth the full retail price. I think for something like this, I would be okay paying 40, 50 pound, but I don't think I would really want to pay more than that. And unfortunately, I did. For those who don't know, I did not get any form of key for this. I did not get a code or anything like that. I did indeed pay full retail price for the deluxe edition, which I downloaded off of the PlayStation Store. Was it worth that? No. No, it was not. Yes, we have a few things back now. For example, we have Snake vs. Monkey, which is obviously really nice to have. We do also have the return of Guy Savage. So if you don't know what Guy Savage is, that is the Nightmare Easter egg from the original, which was not present in the actual remaster. That is now back and also totally redone. It has no rewards or anything like that. It's just a nice little minigame, an Easter egg. So it is nice that that came back. But again, that still doesn't justify the price to me. Personally, I do think it should fall around the £40 to £50 mark. Yes, a lot of detail has gone into remaking the game. I do think it looks beautiful. But at the same time, it's still just a... But at the same time, it's still just the same game as 20 years ago, only it's got a new coat of paint. So with it being the same game, just with a new face, yeah, I don't really think that warrants such a high price. Now, yes, I paid it. Yes, I've enjoyed the game. Would I pay that again? I don't think I would. It's like, I think 40 to 50 for the base, and then maybe 60 for the deluxe. Because obviously, the deluxe only has a couple of costumes, really. Now, that's basically all that is in the actual deluxe version. There's nothing special or unique about it. It's definitely not something that warrants such a high price point anyway, in my opinion. However, those are all my thoughts. You guys can obviously have your own opinion. Let me know, are you buying the game yourself? Is it something you pre-ordered? Are you just picking it up? Are you waiting until the price drops? Or are you just not going to pick it up? Let me know down below in the comments. But until next time, everybody, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.